told him he was just a kid, but Berry Gordy didn't see a kid, he saw a machine. A money-making, chart-topping, culture-shifting machine wrapped in a child's body. What happened inside the walls of Motown wasn't just music history. It was a masterclass in control, profit, and the cold mathematics of stardom. And Michael Jackson paid for every lesson with his childhood. Stay with us, because by reason number 1, you're going to question everything you thought you knew about the greatest entertainer who ever lived. Reason number 10. Before Michael Jackson was a moonwalk, before he was a sequined glove, before he was the king of pop, he was a product. And Berry Gordy understood that earlier than anyone alive. When the Jackson 5 walked through the doors of Motown Records in 1969, Gordy didn't just hear music, he heard leverage. He heard a demographic no label had fully cracked black youth with disposable income, white teenagers hungry for something with a pulse, and a global market that had never seen a child performer with that kind of raw, uncontainable electricity. Michael was 11 years old. 11, and Berry Gordy was already calculating his shelf life. Here's what the history books leave out. Gordy didn't sign the Jackson 5 because he loved them. He signed them because they were a ready-made solution to a business problem. Motown's sales were slipping. The adult acts were aging. The youth market was drifting. The Jacksons were a correction. A strategic acquisition dressed up in sequins and choreography. Gordy even manufactured their origin story publicly, claiming he discovered them himself, erasing the credit owed to Gladys Knight and Bobby Taylor, who actually brought them in. That wasn't nostalgia. That wasn't a slip of memory. That was brand ownership. You control the narrative. You control the value. And Michael's story was never his own from the moment he stepped inside that building. It was Motown's intellectual property before the ink was even dry. And the most devastating part? Michael didn't know. He just sang. He just danced. He performed with everything inside him because performing was the only place the pressure lifted. The only place nobody was measuring his quarterly output. But Berry Gordy was always measuring. And reason number 9 is going to show you exactly how deep that measurement went. Reason number 9, here's a question nobody asks. Why did the Jackson 5 smile so much? It wasn't joy, it was training. Berry Gordy ran Motown like a finishing school, a highly controlled environment designed to produce black excellence that was digestible, palatable, and profitable in a predominantly white commercial marketplace. And Michael Jackson was his most prized student and his most demanding curriculum. Motown had an in-house program called Artist Development. On the surface, it looked like charm school etiquette lessons, stage presence coaching, media training. But underneath the polish, it was systematic psychological conditioning. Every artist who came through those doors was broken down and rebuilt as a carefully managed, market-tested version of themselves. For grown adults, that process was difficult. For an 11-year-old boy still forming his identity, it was erasure. Michael was taught how to walk into a room, how to answer a journalist's question without saying anything real. How to be charming without being controversial, accessible without being threatening, relatable without ever being too raw, too unfiltered, too himself. He was being shaped into a character, and that character's name happened to be Michael Jackson. Think about what that does to a developing mind. At 11, 12, 13 years old, you are supposed to be discovering yourself, your humor, your preferences, your relationship to your own emotions and your own body. That process is supposed to be messy and private and unpredictable. Instead, every natural impulse Michael had was being filtered through a single question: will this sell? Michael said for the rest of his life that he never had a childhood. People assumed he meant the touring schedule, the relentless performing, the lack of free time, but it was more fundamental than that.
Let's have a good time, you and me. Sitting there.
He never had the private space to just be wrong, to be awkward, to be a nobody for an afternoon. Every moment was curriculum. Every moment was product refinement.
We can tear the house down, we can tear the house down, we can tear the whole house.
And reason number 8 is going to show you exactly where all that money went and who it didn't go to.
Enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there. Back to the countdown.
Reason number 8, let's talk about money. Because Berry Gordy certainly was. Between 1969 and 1975, the Jackson 5 were one of the most commercially explosive acts in Motown history. Record sales in the tens of millions, a global touring machine, merchandise on store shelves across America and Europe, their own Saturday morning cartoon on ABC, their faces on lunchboxes, posters and bubblegum cards sold in gas stations from Detroit to Tokyo. The Jackson 5 were an empire generating generational wealth. The family received almost none of it. Under the contracts Berry Gordy structured, the Jacksons were locked into royalty rates that bordered on predatory even by the already exploitative standards of 1969. The exact numbers were deliberately buried in legal architecture designed to be impenetrable to a family from Gary, Indiana, with no industry experience, no independent legal counsel, and no leverage to push back. Here's how the mechanism worked. Motown controlled the recording. Motown controlled the publishing. Motown controlled the touring infrastructure and the licensing deals and the merchandise agreements. The Jacksons were effectively highly visible, highly talented employees inside their own enterprise. They weren't partners in Motown. They worked for Motown. And that distinction, compounded over years and across hundreds of millions in revenue, is the difference between generational wealth and a paycheck that somebody else decided the amount of. Michael absorbed this lesson at a cellular level. He never forgot it. Years later, in one of the most audacious strategic moves in music industry history, he spent $47 million to acquire the ATV publishing catalog containing hundreds of the Beatles' most valuable songs. Then watched as Sony paid hundreds of millions more to merge their catalogs into what became one of the most valuable music assets on Earth. He learned that from Berry Gordy. He learned it by watching what it cost to not own your own work. And when he was old enough to do something about it, he did. But at 11 years old, inside that Motown recording booth, he was still the product, not yet the businessman. And reason number 7 is going to show you exactly how they kept it that way. Reason number 7, there is a recording session story that almost nobody talks about. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it. In the early Motown sessions, engineers and producers recalled that Michael would routinely nail a vocal in the first or second take. Not adequately, not acceptably, perfectly. With an emotional instinct and technical precision that left grown professionals standing in the control room with their mouths open. And then he would be asked to do it again and again and again and again. Not because something was wrong with what he did, but because the label wanted options. Wanted control over which version of Michael they released to the world. Wanted to be the ones who decided which emotion, which intensity, which moment of vulnerability the public would receive. That sounds like normal studio practice. It is not normal when the person being directed is a child whose entire sense of self-worth is built around whether the adults in the room approve of him. Here is what repeated redirection does to a developing psyche. When you are consistently told that your natural, instinctive, first impulse performance is not the final answer, that there is always a better version, that someone else will select you, stop trusting yourself. You begin performing for approval rather than for expression. You develop a dependency on external validation because your own internal compass has been methodically overridden by people with more authority and more control over your life than you have yourself. Michael Jackson spent his entire adult life in extraordinary pursuit of approval from audiences, from critics, from collaborators, from the public. He chased it with a hunger that, from the outside, resembled ego or obsession. But it was neither of those things. It was a wound that was opened in those early Motown sessions and never fully allowed to close. No matter how many sold-out stadiums or platinum certifications tried to cover it, Gordy's creative control structure planted self-doubt inside the most talented performer of the 20th century. And reason number 6 is going to reveal the psychological weapon Gordy used intentionally or not to make sure that doubt kept Michael working. Reason number 6. Here's the business strategy stripped completely bare, and it is more calculated than most people are comfortable sitting with. Berry Gordy understood something in 1969 that modern entertainment executives now build entire companies around. Parasocial attachment to child performers is exponentially more powerful, more durable, and more commercially valuable than attachment to adult performers. When the public falls in love with a child star, something different happens. You don't just admire their talent, you feel protective of them. You feel personally invested in their journey. You follow them not just as a consumer, but as something closer to a guardian, a distant but emotionally committed witness to their growth. And that emotional bond doesn't dissolve when they grow up. It transforms. The child becomes the adult, and you've already spent years in relationship with them. You are not walking away. The sunk cost of your emotional investment is too high. Gordy engineered the Jackson 5's public image with this psychology operating at its center. Michael, the youngest, the most magnetically gifted, the one with the gap-toothed smile that made you want to protect him, was deliberately positioned as the emotional anchor of the group. Interviews were crafted to reveal vulnerability. Television appearances were designed to showcase childlike wonder alongside jaw-dropping ability. He was simultaneously a prodigy which generated awe and a little boy which generated tenderness. That specific combination is commercially addictive, and it is very difficult to manufacture. With Michael, it was real. Gordy simply weaponized it.
Let's have a good time, you and me. Sitting there.
Every strategic choice, the matching outfits, the choreography that spotlighted Michael without alienating the brothers, the song selections that gave him vocal moments perfectly calibrated to his natural strength was an investment in a long-term emotional bond between this specific child and the global public. Gordy was planting seeds he expected to harvest for decades, and he was completely right. He just didn't anticipate that the harvest would ultimately escape his control, because reason number 5 reveals the alliance that kept Michael trapped and the unexpected way it eventually set him free. Reason number 5, we need to talk about Joe Jackson. Because the relationship between Berry Gordy and Joe Jackson has been flattened by history into something far too simple and far too convenient.
Let's dance. let's shout.
The accepted narrative goes like this. Joe was the abusive father, Gordy was the music industry visionary, and Michael was an innocent caught between them. Two separate forces pulling on the same child.
Let's shout and shout. Shake your body down to the ground.
But the reality is more structurally disturbing than that, and more important to understand if you want to see how the machine actually worked. Berry Gordy and Joe Jackson were not opposing forces, they were aligned.
Shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance. Let's shout.
They wanted the same outcome, Michael's maximum commercial output, and they maintained that alignment by carefully never challenging each other's domain.
Shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance. Let's shout.
Joe controlled the family unit, Gordy controlled the business infrastructure. Michael existed at the precise intersection of both authorities with no advocate exclusively in his corner.
You tease me with your loving too.
Nobody whose only job was to ask, what does Michael need? Gordy was not naive about Joe's methods.
Hard to get, 'cause I do know that
The music industry of that era, particularly the world of black child performers, was not sheltered from the realities of how some stage parents operated. And while Gordy was not in the room during Joe's moments of cruelty, he benefited from what those moments produced.
Shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance. Let's shout.
A child performer who is terrified of disappointing his father is a child performer who will not complain about 18-hour rehearsal schedules.
Let's shout. Shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance. Let's shout.
Who will not ask uncomfortable questions about where the money goes. Who will simply perform, because performing is the only place where the fear goes quiet.
Won't you? Let's dance. Let's shout.
Michael said it himself in his own words in interviews late in his life. When he was on stage, the pain disappeared. Performance was freedom. Gordy's team heard that and built a schedule designed to keep Michael in that state, constantly performing, constantly in the studio, constantly on tour.
Something to get closer to your soul. And you do know.
The more Michael performed, the more he produced. The more he produced, the more valuable the machine became.
Shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance. Let's shout.
And the machine ran beautifully. It ran on a child's need to escape his own life.
Shout. Shake your body down to the ground.
Reason number 4 is going to show you the moment that machine finally cracked and what it cost.
Shout. Shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance. Let's shout.
Reason number 4, in 1975, the Jackson 5 left Motown. They signed with Epic Records.
Bring on the good times. I'm bringing on the boogie.
They dropped the Jackson 5 name, which Gordy owned and retained, and became simply the Jacksons. Most people frame this as liberation, a clean break. The family finally free from Gordy's grip. It was not clean.
Disco. From that night I kissed our love goodbye.
And it was not free. When the Jacksons walked out the door, Berry Gordy kept everything that mattered most.
Don't blame it on the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight.
He kept the masters, every single Jackson 5 recording ever made under that label, every iconic song. I Want You Back. ABC. I'll Be There. Robin Never Can Say Goodbye.
Coming on a boogie. That nasty boogie bugs me.
The recordings that introduced Michael Jackson to the world before he was 15 years old, none of those belonged to the family that created them. They were Motown's property.
Somehow it has drugged me. Spellbound rhythm gets me.
And they generated royalties, licensing revenue, and commercial placements for decades' money that flowed to Berry Gordy's ledger, not the Jacksons.
On my feet, I changed my life completely.
This is the invisible architecture of debt that Gordy built into every Motown contract. You could leave, but leaving meant leaving your history behind.
I seen the lightning lead me. My baby just can't take her.
Your most valuable work, the work that made you famous, that made you worth anything to the next label that signed you, remained in someone else's vault, generating wealth for someone else's estate, indefinitely.
A fire burns inside me. Boogie's got me in.
Michael felt that specific wound with a precision that bordered on obsession.
Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good time.
It is the direct psychological origin of what would become his most audacious business move, paying $47 million in 1985 for the ATV Music Publishing catalog.
Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good time.
Other people's most valuable creative work before they realized they should have held on to it.
I'm blame it on a boogie. Don't you blame it, son.
doing to others legally, commercially, without malice what Motown had done to him.
Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on
Paul McCartney famously said Michael told him he was going to buy the Beatles' catalogue while they were friends. McCartney laughed. Michael took notes. He'd learned from the best.
Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good
And reason number 3 goes inside the recording sessions to show you exactly how that education happened, one calibrated session at a time.
times.
Reason number 3, let's get into the specific operational mechanics of how Berry Gordy turned childhood into content, because this is not metaphor. This was deliberate, systematic, and documented.
You're gone, even though you're
Gordy's team studied Michael Jackson the way an engineer studies a prototype. They catalogued responses. They tracked which vocal runs caused the audience to physically react,
before I love somebody else.
which dance moves generated the loudest screams at live performances,
Things don't look as bad as they did yesterday.
which facial expressions translated most powerfully through a television screen versus a stage versus a photograph on a magazine cover.
Every minute.
They were building what we would now call a behavioral engagement map, a conversion optimization profile for a human being, and then they optimized him against it.
Gotta find a way some.
Songs were selected and sometimes written from scratch specifically to give Michael opportunities to deploy his highest impact moments at precisely the right intervals.
Some way.
Arrangements were structured to build toward Michael's vocal climax in a way that felt spontaneous but was architecturally engineered.
'Cause I gotta keep on living.
Choreography was designed to make him the magnetic center of a group performance without making the brothers invisible, a balance that required constant, careful, almost surgical adjustment.
Somehow, nothing's gonna stop.
This was not merely good production work. It was product engineering at a level the industry had never seen applied to a child performer. Michael was the product,
Gotta find a way some.
and his genuinely extraordinary gifts, his supernatural instincts, his physical intelligence,
Somehow, nothing's gonna stop me.
his emotional authenticity as a performer were being converted into reliable, repeatable, scalable outputs.
Now, gotta find a way some.
His realness was being industrialized. The profound cruelty of this arrangement is not that it happened.
Even though you're gone.
Artists are always shaped by their environments. That is the nature of development.
Even though you're gone.
The cruelty is that it happened before Michael had any conceptual framework to recognize it or consent to it.
All the plans I had.
He believed he was simply performing. He had no awareness that he was being systematically calibrated.
But I got to give 'em up and start anew.
No knowledge that the version of himself the world was receiving had been selected from dozens of takes by a team of adults who'd decided which Michael was most commercially optimal.
Gotta find a way somehow.
Reason number 2, here is the moment everything shifted, the moment the student became the strategist. In 1980, Michael Jackson renegotiated his contract with Epic Records. He was 21 years old. For the first time in his professional life, which had begun when he was barely old enough to read a contract, let alone understand one, he walked into a negotiation with a team whose only loyalty was to him. Attorney John Branca, managers Ron Weisner and Freddie Demon, people whose paycheck depended not on the label's satisfaction but on Michael's. The deal they constructed was unprecedented in the history of popular music. A royalty rate of 27%, nearly unheard of for any artist at any level. Creative control provisions that kept executive interference out of his studio. Ownership of his masters after a specified period, performance approval rights. Tour structure that maximized his cut of live revenue rather than the promoters. It was the anti-Motown contract. Written with full knowledge of exactly what the Motown contract had cost. Every protective clause was the scar tissue of a specific wound. And then Michael made Thriller, the best-selling album in the history of recorded music, the commercial validation of every negotiating position his team had fought for. And this time, when the checks arrived, when the licensing calls came in, when the stadiums sold out on 6 continents, Michael owned his proportional share of it in a way that would have been unthinkable for the 11-year-old boy in that Motown booth. The straight line from Berry Gordy's exploitation to Michael Jackson's empire is not coincidence, it is education. Gordy taught him, through deprivation and control, exactly what was possible when an artist held the power. Michael spent his career systematically reclaiming what had been extracted from his younger self. The publishing acquisitions, the master negotiations, the merchandise deals, the unprecedented tour agreements. None of it was accidental. It was a man settling a very old score, not with anger, but with strategy. And reason number 1 reveals something even larger, something that reaches far beyond Michael Jackson. Something that explains the entire world of child entertainment as you know it today. Reason number 1, and here we arrive, the reason that sits above every other reason on this list. The one that reframes everything you have just heard and connects it to the world you are living in right now. Berry Gordy didn't just turn Michael Jackson's childhood into a business strategy. He turned it into a blueprint. And the entire global entertainment industry has been running on that blueprint ever since. Look at what exists today and trace it backward. The television talent competitions that take teenagers from ordinary lives and place them inside systems of intense coaching, image management, contract structures, and public parasocial bonding, all before those young people have the experience to understand what they are agreeing to. The K-pop training programs that identify children as young as 10 or 11 move them into company-controlled environments and spend years systematically developing them into optimized commercial performers with cultivated public personas and limited personal autonomy. The social media pipelines where platform algorithms reward child creators for maximizing output, engagement, and emotional vulnerability systems that extract value from children, while their parents negotiate deals with companies whose interests are structurally opposed to the child's long-term well-being. Gordy did not invent the exploitation of child talent. That predates Motown by generations. What he did was industrialize it. He proved, with the Jackson 5, that you could take raw childhood talent and apply systematic development, strategic image positioning, psychological conditioning, and contractual architecture to produce not just a hit record, but a decades-long cultural dynasty. The industry watched everything Gordy built with those children, and then the industry scaled it globally. Michael Jackson is the proof of concept that launched 1,000 systems. The most successful, most studied, most imitated example of what happens when you invest maximally in a child performer with extraordinary natural gifts and surround that investment with total institutional control. His suffering was the research and development phase of an industry that now generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually on the labor of young people who, like Michael at 11, do not fully understand the nature of what they are walking into.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there.
Disappear.